When Danielle Williams stepped into the Devil's Den that Tuesday night, she looked like Preya, a lone black woman in a biker bar where strangers weren't welcome and outsiders rarely left unscathed. But the Iron Serpents who watched her order whiskey and ignored their threats had no idea they were staring at a decorated Marine with 3 combat tours and a 7-year obsession. And when Snake's rough hands tore her jacket sleeve, exposing that unmistakable Marine Corps tattoo, the sudden silence that fell over the bar wasn't respect. It was the collective. It's realization that they had just cornered something far more dangerous than they could handle. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The Devil's Den sat like a scar on the edge of Millfield. It's Tennessee, where the main road bent toward nothing but darkness and bad decisions. Smoke hung thick in the air, mixing cigarette ash with the smell of stale beer and motor oil that seemed to seep from the very walls. The jukebox in the corner wheezed out an old Lynyrd Skynyrd tune, its neon glow casting everything in shades of amber and red. Wooden tables, scarred by years of knife points and beer bottles, filled the cramped space. This wasn't the kind of place you stumbled into by accident. The regulars knew their spots. Truckers hunched over the bar, nursing whiskey and complaining about fuel prices. A few locals played pool in the back, their voices rising and falling with each shot. But tonight, the real where leather jackets gleamed under the dim lights. The Iron Serpents had claimed their territory, and everyone else just tried to stay invisible. Outside, gravel crunched under tires as another car pulled into the lot. The engine cut, and for a moment, everything felt normal. It's just another Tuesday night where nothing much happened, where tomorrow would look exactly like today. Then the door opened. Danielle Williams stepped into the Devil's Den like she owned the place. Mid-30s, tall, with the kind of posture that came from years of standing at attention. Her dark skin caught the neon light as she surveyed the room, taking in every face, every exit, every potential threat. She wore simple clothes jeans that fit well, a black leather jacket zipped halfway up, boots that had seen some miles. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed for attention. But in a place like this, being different was enough. The conversations didn't stop all at once. It was more like ripples in a pond, starting with the men closest to the door and spreading outward. Heads turned, whispers started. The pool game in the back stuttered to a halt as someone missed an easy shot. By the time Danielle reached the bar, the whole place was watching. She didn't seem to notice. Or if she did, she didn't care. "What can I get you?" The bartender was young, maybe 25, with nervous hands and kind eyes. His name tag read Eli, and he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Whiskey. Neat." Danielle's voice was steady, calm. She slid onto a bar stool and placed her hands flat on the bar, studying the bottles behind Eli like she was reading a map. Eli poured the drink with hands that shook just slightly. When he set it down, he leaned closer than necessary, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Lady, I don't know what brought you here tonight, but you picked the wrong place." Danielle lifted the glass, inhaling the sharp scent of alcohol. "Did I?" The Serpents don't like outsiders. Especially, he caught himself before finishing the sentence. But they both knew what he meant, especially someone who looked like her. In a place like this, she took a sip, letting the whiskey burn down her throat. "Good thing I'm not planning to join their book club." Eli's eyes darted toward the corner booth where the real danger sat. Rex Thompson commanded the Iron Serpents with the quiet authority of a man who'd never met a problem he couldn't solve with his fists. Pushing 50, built like a linebacker who'd never stopped training, he wore his colors with pride. The Serpent. Patch on his back seemed to writhe in the flickering light. His gray beard was trimmed neat, his eyes sharp as broken glass. Rex had noticed Danielle the moment she walked in. Now he watched her with the patience of a predator, studying her movements, cataloging her weaknesses. He didn't like surprises, and strangers asking questions always meant trouble. "She's got brass, I'll give her that." The voice belonged to Viper, Rex's lieutenant, and as his name suggested, with arms covered in faded tattoos. He perched on the edge of the booth like a spider waiting for something to fall into his web. Rex grunted. Brass gets you killed in places like this. But he made no move to approach her, not yet. There was something about the way she held herself, something, that made him cautious. 30 years of running with bikers, he'd learned to read people. This woman wasn't a lost tourist or a thrill seeker looking for danger. She had purpose. Danielle wasn't here for the atmosphere. 3 weeks of following dead-end leads had brought her to this backwater town, chasing whispers and half-remembered stories. Someone had mentioned the iron serpents in connection with a name she'd been hunting for 7 years. A name that woke her up in cold sweats and made her reach for weapons that weren't there. She'd been patient. She'd been careful. But patience had its limits. A drunk stumbled away from the bar, weaving between tables like a ship in rough water. His shoulder clipped Danielle's, sending beers splashing across the bar. Instead of cursing or pushing back, she reached out with one steady hand and caught his arm, keeping him upright. "Easy there, friend," she said, her voice gentle. The drunk looked at her with bleary eyes, trying to focus. "Sorry, miss. Didn't see you there." But as she steadied him, her grip shifted just slightly. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would draw attention, just a subtle adjustment of leverage that left the man suddenly aware of how easily she could have sent him sprawling. The realization sobered him faster than coffee. "Thanks," he mumbled, shuffling away with more care. Eli watched the whole thing with growing curiosity. He'd worked here for 2 years, seen plenty of fights start over less, but Danielle had diffused the situation with the kind of calm control he'd only seen in one place, the military base outside town, where his brother had trained before shipping. Out to Afghanistan before coming home in a box, the thought made his chest tight, but he pushed it down. "Not here. Not now." "You served," he said quietly, refilling her glass though she hadn't asked. Danielle's eyes flicked to his, sharp and assessing. "What makes you say that?" "The way you handled that. The way you sit." "My brother was Army. Taught me to recognize the signs." She didn't confirm or deny it, just nodded slightly. "Sorry for your loss." Eli's throat worked. "Yeah, me too." The moment stretched between them, understanding passing without words. Then Danielle's attention shifted, drawn by the scrape of chairs and the heavy footsteps of men who'd decided they'd watched long enough. 3 serpents approached the bar. The leader was a mountain of muscle and attitude, his belly straining against a leather vest covered in patches. Snake, they called him, though he looked more like a rhinoceros. His face was red from drink and anger, and his small eyes fixed on Danielle like she was something that had crawled out from under a rock. "Oh well," Snake drawled, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet bar. "What do we have here?" Danielle didn't turn around. She lifted her glass and took another sip, watching Snake's reflection in the mirror behind the bar. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn," Snake continued, emboldened by her silence. His friends chuckled, the sound ugly and sharp. "This ain't the kind of neighborhood for your sort, sweetheart." The word sweetheart came out like a curse. Their patrons began moving away from the bar, sensing trouble. Eli's hand moved toward the baseball bat he kept under the register. But Danielle caught his eye in the mirror and shook her head slightly. Still, she didn't turn around. Snake's face darkened. Like he wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by someone he saw as beneath him. He moved closer, close enough that Danielle could smell the beer on his breath and the motor oil ground into his clothes. "I'm talking to you, girl." Now she turned, swiveling on her bar stool to face him. Her movements were fluid, controlled, and when she looked up at Snake, her expression was perfectly calm. "I heard you. Then you heard me tell you to get lost." "Heard you make some noise?" "Whether you were actually telling me anything worth listening to is debatable." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Snake's friends tensed, ready for violence. But from the corner booth, Rex's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Snake." One word spoken quietly, but it carried absolute authority. Snake's head whipped around to find Rex watching him with those cold gray eyes. Let her be. For now. Snake's jaw worked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better than to cross Rex in public. He stepped back, pointing a thick finger at Danielle. "Ain't over." "It never started," she replied, turning back to her drink. Snake stalked away, his friends trailing behind. The normal sounds of the bar gradually resumed, but the tension remained, coiled like a spring waiting to snap. Eli leaned across the bar, his voice barely audible. "You should go now. While they're giving you space." Danielle studied her reflection in the amber liquid. 7 years of searching had led her here, to this moment, to these people. Walking away now would mean starting over, following new leads that might take her anywhere or nowhere. She thought about the photo in her jacket pocket, creased from handling. The face that smiled back at her from that image would never smile again, would never hold her hand or whisper promises in the dark. That man was dead because someone had sold him out, traded his life for money and advantage. That someone was. Here, she could feel it. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, finishing her drink. Rex had been watching the whole exchange, and something in Danielle's posture, something in the way she'd handled Snake's challenge sparked his interest. Some random troublemaker or activist looking to make a statement? There was steel in her spine, purpose in her eyes, and that made her dangerous. He stood, his massive frame unfolding from the booth. The other serpents watched as their leader crossed the room, his boots heavy on the scarred wooden floor. Conversations died as he passed. Even Snake shut his mouth. Rex stopped beside Danielle's stool, close enough to be intimidating but not close enough to be threatening. "Yet buy you another drink?" She looked at him in the mirror, taking his measure. Close up, she could see the intelligence behind those cold eyes, the careful calculation of a man who'd survived by thinking 3 moves ahead. "I can buy my own. I'm sure you can. But I'm curious about what brings a woman like you to a place like this. A woman like me." Rex smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Someone with training, someone with purpose, someone who's looking for something specific. Danielle turned on her stool to face him fully. "What makes you think I'm looking for anything?" "Because nobody ends up here by accident. Especially not someone who handles herself like you do." He gestured to Eli, who reluctantly poured 2 whiskeys. Rex took one, raising it in a mock toast. "So what is it, ex-husband? Money owed? Old grudge?" Danielle picked up her glass but didn't drink. "Maybe I just like the ambience." Rex chuckled, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. "Maybe, or maybe you're hunting someone you think has connections to my club." The words hung in the air between them. Danielle's grip on her glass tightened almost imperceptibly, but Rex caught it. He was good at reading people, at finding their pressure points. "I wouldn't know where to start, looking for anyone connected to your club," she said carefully. "Wouldn't you?" Rex leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow seemed more threatening than shouting. "See, here's the thing about small towns. Word travels fast. And lately I've been hearing about someone asking questions. Someone looking for a particular man with a particular scar." Danielle's blood went cold, but her expression didn't change. "Sounds like someone's been telling stories." "Oh, they have. And you know what's interesting? The man you're looking for, if he exists, if he's who I think he is, that's the kind of man who makes powerful enemies. Kind of enemies who might send someone with your particular skills to collect a debt." He straightened up, his smile widening. "But of course, that's all speculation. After all, what would I know about scarred men and old debts?" Danielle set her glass down with careful precision. Her heart was pounding, but years of training kept her breathing steady, her hands still. Interesting theory, isn't it? Of course, theories are dangerous things. Sometimes they lead people places they shouldn't go, make them ask questions that are better left unasked. Rex finished his drink and set the empty glass on the bar with a sharp click. "Word of advice, miss whoever you are. Some ghosts are better left buried. Some debts are too old to collect. Some searches end badly for the people doing the searching." He turned to go, then paused. "Enjoy your drink. And your stay in our little town. I hope it's brief." As Rex walked back to his booth, Danielle felt the weight of every eye in the bar. The message had been delivered, the warning given. Now everyone waited to see what she would do. She picked up her glass and drained it in one swallow, feeling the burn all the way down. When she set it back on the bar, her decision was made. "Another," she said to Eli. His eyes widened. "Ma'am, maybe you should another," Eli poured with shaking hands. As he set the glass down, Danielle looked at him directly. "You lost your brother in Afghanistan?" Eli nodded, not trusting his voice. "I lost someone there too. It's someone important." She lifted the glass, studying the liquid like it held secrets. Someone who died because the wrong people had information they shouldn't have had. Understanding dawned in Eli's eyes. "You think I think I'm exactly where I need to be?" She took a sip, then stood, fishing money from her pocket and placing it on the bar. "Keep the change." And Eli, she waited until he met her eyes. Some ghosts need to be dug up before they can be buried proper. The whiskey hit Danielle's empty stomach like liquid fire, but she welcomed the burn. It reminded her she was still alive, still fighting. Around her, the Devil's Den had settled into an uneasy quiet, the kind that comes before storms or violence. She could feel the attention focused on her like heat from a furnace. The iron. Serpents had stopped pretending they weren't watching. Snake glared from across the room, his thick hands wrapped around a beer bottle like he was imagining her neck. His buddies whispered among themselves, shooting glances her way. But it was Rex who worried her. The leader sat in his booth like a king holding court, his expression unreadable. She'd gotten his attention. That was good. It was also dangerous. Danielle settled back onto her bar stool and made herself comfortable. If they thought one veiled threat would send her running, they were about to learn differently. She'd tracked leads from Kabul to Kansas City, following breadcrumbs and whispers. She wasn't stopping now. "You sure about this?" Eli's voice was barely audible as he wiped down glasses with nervous energy. "I'm sure." But even as she said it, memories tried to surface. The smell of cordite and burning diesel, the weight of someone dying in her arms. Marcus had been reaching for something when the life left his eyes, his mouth moving soundlessly around words she'd never hear. She pushed the memory down. This wasn't the time. The jukebox kicked into a new song, something by Hank Williams Jr., that seemed to loosen the tension just slightly. A few conversations resumed, but the undercurrent remained. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. Rex made the first move. He stood with the casual grace of a man comfortable with violence, straightening his leather vest as he approached the bar. His boots announced each step, and Danielle caught his reflection growing larger in the mirror behind the bottles. "Mind if I sit?" She gestured to the empty stool beside her. "Free country." Rex chuckled as he settled his bulk onto the stool, which creaked under his weight. "Is it? Sometimes I wonder." He signaled Eli for a beer, and the young bartender complied with obvious reluctance. The bottle appeared with record speed, and Eli retreated to the far end of the bar like he was escaping a fire. "So," Rex said, taking a long pull from his beer, "since we're going to be neighbors for the evening, maybe we should get properly acquainted. Name's Rex Thompson." "Danielle?" "Just Danielle?" "Just Rex." He smiled, and this time it seemed almost genuine. "Fair enough. You know, Danielle, I've been thinking about our conversation, about theories and such." "Have you?" "I have, and I realized I might have come across as unwelcoming. That's not the Southern way, is it? Treating a guest poorly?" Danielle studied his profile. "I wouldn't know. I'm not from the South." "No, I don't suppose you are. Where then?" "Here and there." Rex nodded like that was exactly the answer he'd expected. "Military brat?" The question caught her off guard, but she recovered quickly. "What makes you ask that?" "The way you carry yourself. The way you assess a room when you walk in. The way you handle drunk idiots without breaking a sweat." He took another drink. "My daddy was Army. 30 years. I know the signs." For a moment, something like understanding passed between them. Then Rex's expression hardened again. Of course, military training can be a dangerous thing in civilian life. All that discipline, all that purpose, but nowhere to aim it, makes some folks ... restless. Ain't that so? "Oh yes. I've seen it before. Warriors without wars, looking for battles that don't need fighting." Danielle turned to face him fully. "And what about you, Rex? What battles are you fighting?" His smile was sharp as a knife blade. "The same ones I've always fought. Keeping what's mine safe. Protecting my family from folks who might want to hurt them. Your family? Rex gestured toward. The serpents scattered around the bar. Every man in that corner booth is my brother. We look out for each other. We keep our business private. Don't appreciate outsiders stirring up old troubles? What kind of troubles? The kind that get people hurt. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the pool table. Voices were raised and Danielle could see Snake pushing forward through a small crowd. Someone had apparently made a comment he didn't like. Looks like your brother's having trouble with his temper, Danielle observed. Rex sighed. Snake's got his issues, but he's loyal. Sometimes that means more than being smart. The situation was escalating. Snake had grabbed some local by the shirt and was shaking him like a rag doll. Other bikers were moving in, scenting blood. Maybe you should. Danielle started, maybe I should what? Before she could answer, Snake's victim broke free and swung wild. His fist caught Snake in the jaw, not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to embarrass. The room went dead silent. Snake's response was swift and brutal. He drove his fist into the man's stomach, doubling him over, then brought his knee up into the man's face. Blood sprayed across the floor. That's enough. Rex's voice cut through the violence like a whip crack. Snake froze, his fist drawn back for another blow. Around the bar, everyone held their breath. He disrespected me, Snake growled. And you? Major point. Let him go. For a moment it looked like Snake might refuse. But Rex's authority was absolute, and eventually Snake stepped back, releasing his hold on the bleeding man. Get out, Rex told the local. Spread the word the serpents aren't looking for trouble, but we won't run from it either. The man stumbled toward the exit, one hand pressed to his nose. His friends helped him to the door, shooting nervous. Glances back at the bikers. Rex returned to his beer like nothing had happened. Where were we? You were explaining about family loyalty. Ah, yes, see, that's the thing about family. Sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes they do things that bring unwanted attention. But you stand by them anyway, because that's what family means. Danielle felt like they were having two conversations at once, the surface one about loyalty and brotherhood, and a deeper one about secrets and protection. Must be nice, she said, having people you can count on. It is. Of course, it works both ways. Family protects you, but it also means you've got responsibilities. People counting on you to make the right choices. And what happens when those choices conflict? Rex set his beer down carefully. What do you mean? What happens when doing right by your family means doing wrong by everyone else? The question hung between them like a challenge. Rex's eyes narrowed, and Danielle could see him reassessing her, trying to figure out exactly how much she knew. That's a philosophical question, he said finally. It seems like it to me. After all, right and wrong are relative concepts. What's wrong for one person might be survival for another. Danielle nodded slowly. That's one way to look at it. Another way might be that some things are just wrong, period. Betrayal, for instance. Selling out people who trusted you. Rex's hand tightened on his beer bottle. You seem to have strong opinions about betrayal. I do. I think people who betray trust deserve whatever they get, even if they had good reasons. Even if they were trying to protect someone they cared about, especially then, because that makes it worse. It makes it personal. The air between them was thick with unspoken threats and accusations. Other patrons were beginning to notice the tension, conversations fading as attention focused on the bar. Rex finished his beer and stood. Well, this has been enlightening. But I should get back to my brothers. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Danielle, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. As he walked away, Danielle realized her hands were shaking slightly. The conversation had revealed more than she'd expected, but also raised new questions. Rex knew something about the man she was hunting. She was sure of it. Oh, but how much? And how deep did his involvement run? Eli appeared at her elbow, refilling her glass without being asked. That looked intense. Just getting acquainted. Lady, I don't know what you're mixed up in, but these aren't people you want to cross. The serpents own this town. It's the sheriff, the mayor, half the businesses there, all either members or too scared to stand up to them. Danielle studied Eli's face. There was fear there, but also something else. Anger, maybe, or grief. Tell me about your brother, she said quietly. Eli's throat worked. What about him? How did he die? Really? The young man glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. Officially. Eyed outside Kandahar. Convoy hit a roadside bomb? Unofficially? Unofficially? Tommy started asking questions about supply routes, about how certain information was getting to the wrong people, about which officers were making deals they shouldn't have been making. Adele's pulse quickened. What kind of deals? I don't know for sure. But Tommy wrote letters, said there was corruption in his unit, officers selling weapons and intel. He was going to report it when he came home, but he never made it home. No, he died 3 days. Before his rotation ended? 3 days. Eli's voice broke slightly on the last words.
Tell me.
Danielle reached out and touched his arm gently. I'm sorry, yeah, well, sorry doesn't bring him back. And sorry doesn't get justice for what happened to him. They sat in silence for a moment, two people bound by grief and the need for answers. Finally, Danielle spoke. The man I'm looking for, he has a scar, runs from his left ear down to his jaw. Military bearing, probably mid-40s now. Ring any bells? Eli's eyes widened. Maybe. There's a guy who comes in sometimes. Keeps to himself, always pays cash. He's got a scar like that. When was the last time you saw him? A few weeks ago? But here's the thing, he wasn't alone. He was with some of the serpents. Real friendly with them, if you know what I mean. Danielle's heart began to race. 7 years of searching, and she was finally close. The man who had destroyed her life, who had sold out her unit and gotten Marcus killed, was here, in this town, connected to these people. What name does he use? Cole. Cole Bradford. The name hit her like a physical blow. She remembered shouting that name across a firebase in Afghanistan, watching a man in Marine fatigues disappear into the night while gunfire erupted around them. Bradford had been Marcus's commanding officer, someone they'd trusted with their lives, someone who'd sold those lives for profit. You know him, Eli said, reading her expression. I know him. Then you know how dangerous this is. If he's connected to the serpents, if they're protecting him, ... they can try. Danielle finished her drink and stood, placing money on the bar. The alcohol had steadied her nerves and sharpened her focus. She knew what she had to do now. Where are you going? Eli asked. To get some air. Think things through. Be careful out there. The serpents don't like people asking questions about their business. Danielle paused at the door, looking back at the young bartender. Eli, if something happens to me, if I don't come back, make sure people know why I was here. Make sure they know what Cole Bradford did. Before he could respond, she was gone, stepping out into the cool night air. Behind her, the Devil's Den continued its uneasy dance of tension and violence. But ahead of her, somewhere in the darkness, was the man she'd been hunting for 7 years. The ghost who'd killed the only man she'd ever loved was about to discover that some ghosts had ghosts of their own, and this one had finally found him. The night air hit Danielle's face like a cold slap, clearing the smoky haze from her lungs and sharpening her thoughts. Behind her, the Devil's Den hummed with tension and barely contained violence. Ahead lay the darkened streets of Millfield, holding secrets she'd spent 7 years trying to uncover. She'd taken 3 steps toward her rental car when she heard the heavy footsteps behind her. Not trying to be subtle, they wanted her to know they were coming. Going somewhere, sweetheart? Snake's voice carried the same ugly sneer it had inside the bar. Danielle didn't turn around, didn't change her pace. In her peripheral vision, she caught movement to more shapes emerging from between parked motorcycles. They'd been waiting for her. Just getting some air, she said calmly, her hand moving casually toward her jacket pocket. Air's free inside, too. Snake's footsteps were getting closer. Of course, everything else is going to cost you. Danielle reached her car and turned to face them. 3 bikers spread out in a loose semicircle, blocking her path back to the bar. Snake. In the middle, flanked by 2 younger men she didn't recognize, all of them carried themselves like predators who'd found easy prey. Rex told you to leave me alone, she pointed out. Snake spat into the gravel. Rex ain't here. And what he don't know won't hurt him. The biker, two snakes, left a skinny kid with needle tracks on his arms, pulled a knife from his boot. Blade glinted under the parking lot's single working streetlight. "Maybe we just want to have a friendly conversation," the kid said, his voice high and nervous. "Ask you some questions about what brings a woman like you to our town." Assessed her options. The alley behind the bar was dark, full of dumpsters and debris that could provide cover or weapons. Her car was too far away to reach before they caught her. The space between two pickup trucks offered an escape route if she could get there. "I already told Rex what brings me here," she said, slowly backing toward the gap between vehicles. "Well, Rex is too polite sometimes." Snake was grinning now, enjoying himself. I think you're some kind of cop. Federal, maybe. ATF or FBI, trying to build a case against us. Do I look like a federal agent to you?" "Hard to tell. You people all look the same to me." The racial slur hung in the air like poison. Danielle felt her carefully controlled temper start to fray. 7 years of hunting, 7 years of restraint, and she was supposed to take abuse. From this waste of oxygen? "That's an interesting theory," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Want to test it?" Something in her tone made Snake hesitate. For just a moment, his predator's instincts kicked in, warning him that maybe this prey wasn't as helpless as she looked. Then his ego overrode his caution. "Boys, I think the lady's trying to scare us." They moved at the same time, converging from 3 directions. But Danielle was already in motion, diving toward the gap between trucks. The kid with the knife was closest, and his inexperience showed he telegraphed his attack. Raising the blade high like he was in some kind of movie, Danielle caught his wrist as he brought it down, using his momentum to spin him around and slam his face into the truck's tailgate. The knife clattered away into the darkness as he dropped like a sack of cement. The second biker came in fast but sloppy, throwing wild punches. Danielle ducked under his swing and drove her elbow into his solar plexus, doubling him over. A quick knee to the face put him down beside his friend. Snake was smarter than his companions, hanging back and letting them test her defenses. Now he pulled a pistol from under his jacket, pointing it at her chest. Well, looks like the lady's got some moves." Danielle raised her hands slowly, but her mind was racing. Snake was holding the gun like someone who'd watched too many gangster movies, one hand, arm extended, trying to look intimidating. "Amateur hour? You made your point," she said. "I'm impressed." "Damn right you should be. Now you're going to get in that car of yours and drive away from here. And you're going to forget all about whatever brought you to our town." "What if I can't forget?" Snake's finger tightened on the trigger. "Then you won't. Live long enough for it to matter." Behind Snake, a shadow detached itself from the darkness between buildings. Eli moved with surprising stealth for someone who looked like he'd never been in a fight in his life. He had something in his hand, a tire iron from the look of it. Danielle kept her eyes on Snake's face, not wanting to give away Eli's approach. "No, you're probably right. Maybe I should just leave, smart girl." Now the tire iron caught Snake across the back of his skull with a sound like a baseball hitting a watermelon. He pitched forward, the gun flying from his grip. Danielle caught the weapon before it hit the ground. Checking the safety with practiced ease, Eli stood over Snake's unconscious form, breathing hard and staring at the tire iron like he couldn't believe what he'd just done. "Did I kill him?" Knelt and checked Snake's pulse. "No, but he's going to have a hell of a headache." "What are you doing out here?" "Saw them follow you. Figured you might need backup." Eli was shaking now, adrenaline making his hands tremble. "I can't believe I just did that. Believe it. You probably saved my life." Danielle tucked Snake's gun into her jacket and looked at the 3 unconscious bikers. "But now we've got a problem. When these idiots wake up, they're going to tell Rex what happened. Will that be bad?" "Very bad. Rex doesn't strike me as the forgiving type, and attacking his men is going to force his hand." Eli wiped sweat from his forehead. "Maybe that's good. Maybe it's time someone stood up to them." Danielle studied the young man's face. There was something different about him. Now a hardness that hadn't been there before. Violence had a way of changing people, of showing them what they were capable of when pushed. "Eli, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. The man I'm looking for, Cole Bradford, you said he comes in with the serpents?" Sometimes, do you know where he stays? Eli hesitated. There's an old motel on the edge of town. The Pines Motor Lodge. Most of the long-term guests are bikers or people who don't want to be found. If he's hiding out somewhere, that'd be my guess. How far? 10 minutes by car? But listen, if you're thinking of going there tonight, I am. Then you better take this. Eli handed her the tire iron. And maybe you should know my brother's death wasn't the only suspicious thing that happened around here. People disappear sometimes. People who ask too many questions. Danielle looked down at the unconscious bikers, then back at Eli. What aren't you telling me? There's something else. About the night my brother died. He called me just a few hours before the convoy was hit. He was scared. He said he'd figured out who was selling information to insurgents. He had proof. What kind of proof? Pictures. Documents. He'd been collecting evidence for weeks. But here's the thing, he said. The corruption went all the way to the top. It's not just some sergeant looking to make extra money. Officers, high-ranking. One's Danielle's blood ran cold. Did he mention any names? Just one. Said there was a Marine colonel who was coordinating with someone stateside, someone who had connections to biker gangs and smuggling operations. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Cole Bradford hadn't just been selling information in Afghanistan, he'd been part of a larger network. One that stretched from military bases to small-town bars like the Devil's Den. Eli, I need you to do something for me. Go back inside and act like nothing happened. If anyone asks where I went, tell them I got spooked and left town. Can you do that? What about these guys? They'll wake up eventually. When they do, they'll probably be too embarrassed to admit they got taken down by a bartender and a woman half their size. Eli managed a weak smile. Yeah, probably. Danielle started toward her car, then paused. Eli, thank you. For your brother. And for tonight? Just find the bastard who killed him. Make him pay. As Danielle drove through Millfield's empty streets, she thought about the young man she'd left behind. Eli had crossed the line tonight, had chosen violence over victimhood. There was no going back from that choice, and she hoped he was strong, enough to live with it. The Pines Motor Lodge squatted on the outskirts of town like a cancer, its neon sign flickering between vacancy and complete darkness. Half the letters were burned out, and the parking lot was full of potholes that could swallow a small car. A few lights showed behind curtained windows. Most of the rooms were dark. Danielle parked across the street and studied the layout. Single-story building, maybe 20 rooms, office at one end. A handful of motorcycles were parked outside various doors, confirming Eli's information about the clientele. She was about to get out of the car when she spotted movement in the shadows behind the building. Two figures were talking in low voices. Their conversation too quiet to overhear, but their body language suggesting secrecy. One of them stepped into the light from a backdoor fixture, and Danielle's heart stopped. 7 years older, leaner than she remembered, but unmistakable. The scar that ran from his left ear to his jaw was pale against his weathered skin, and his military bearing was still evident despite his civilian clothes. Cole Bradford, the ghost she'd been hunting. The second figure remained in shadow, but from his size and stance, Danielle guessed it was one of the serpents. They talked for another minute. Then Cole handed the other man what looked like a manila envelope. Money changed hands, and then Cole disappeared back into the darkness. Danielle waited until the biker rode away on his Harley before moving. She crossed the street quietly, avoiding the pools of light from the working fixtures, the motel's back. Area was cluttered with dumpsters and abandoned furniture, providing plenty of cover. She found Cole's room by process of elimination. It was the only one with light showing that didn't have a motorcycle parked outside. The curtains were drawn, but she could see movement through a gap where they didn't quite meet. Cole was packing. Danielle crept closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the window, she could see him moving efficiently around the small room, stuffing clothes and papers into a duffel bag. On the bed lay a passport and what looked like plane tickets. He was running. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. After 7 years of searching, after finally tracking him down, he was about to disappear again, whatever deal he'd just made with the serpents. It was his exit strategy. She had to move now. Dawn was still hours away when Danielle finally made it back to her own motel room across town. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door, adrenaline and exhaustion warring. In her system, the confrontation at the Pines had gone differently than she'd expected. And now everything was more complicated. She sat on the edge of the bed and unwrapped the bandage around her left hand, examining the cut across her knuckles. It wasn't deep, but it would leave a mark. Like so many others, the mirror on the dresser reflected back a woman who looked older than her 34 years. Combat tours, years of hunting, and a lifetime of anger had carved lines around her eyes and mouth. But it was the scars that told the real story, some visible, some hidden beneath clothes and skin. The largest one ran across her right shoulder, a memento from the same IED that had killed Marcus. She'd been unconscious when they'd pulled her. From the wreckage, hadn't woken up for 3 days. When she did, the first thing she'd asked about was her fiancé. The silence that followed had been louder than any explosion. Cole Bradford had visited her in the field hospital exactly once. He'd stood at the foot of her bed, his face carefully blank, and told her that Marcus had died a hero, that his sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten, that the investigation into the ambush was ongoing. All lies. What Cole hadn't told her was that he'd already been selling information to insurgents for months, that Marcus and the rest of her squad had died because their commanding officer had traded their lives for money and safe passage out of Afghanistan. She'd learn the truth later, piece by piece, as she'd recovered and started asking questions. Official channels had been useless. The investigation was classified. The reports buried, the witnesses transferred or discharged, but soldiers talked, and eventually the whispers reached her. Cole Bradford was dirty. He'd made a deal with the enemy and disappeared into the night, leaving a trail of bodies behind him. Danielle had made her own deal that day with herself, with Marcus's memory, with whatever sense of justice still existed in a world gone mad. She would find Cole Bradford, and she would make him pay. 7 years of searching had led her here. To this moment, to the choice she'd made 3 hours ago at the Pines Motor Lodge. She could have killed him. Should have, maybe. He'd been alone, distracted, packing for another escape. One shot through the window, and her hunt would have been over instead. She'd done something that surprised even her. She'd knocked on his door. The memory played back in vivid detail. Cole's face when he'd opened the door and seen her standing. Their shock, fear, and something that might have been relief all warring in his expression. "Hello, Cole." "Danielle." His voice had been steady, but she'd seen his hand move toward the gun he kept in a shoulder holster. "It's been a long time." "Years, for months, 16 days, you've been counting." Among other things, they'd stared at each other across the threshold, two people bound by betrayal and death. Cole had aged hard, she'd noticed. His hair was more gray than brown now, and new lines mapped the territory around his eyes. The scar was exactly as she remembered it, a reminder of some long-ago violence that had marked him before he'd learned to mark others. "You going to invite me in, or do we do this in the doorway?" Cole had stepped aside, and she'd entered the shabby motel room with its water-stained walls and carpets that had seen too much. His duffel bag sat on the bed, half-packed with the detritus of a life lived on the run, going somewhere. She'd asked, always. "It's safer that way." Safer for who? Cole had closed the door and turned to face her, his hand still hovering near his weapon. "For everyone involved?" "Marcus wasn't involved in your deals, Cole. Neither were the rest of my squad. But they died anyway." "You don't understand, then? Explain it to me." For a moment she'd thought he might actually try. There'd been something in his expression, a flicker of the man she'd once respected, once followed into combat without question. Then it was gone, replaced by the calculating coldness of a survivor. "Some things are better left buried, Danielle. You should know that by now. Like the fact that you've sold us out. Like the fact that you've traded American lives for money and safe passage. It wasn't that simple. It never is it? There's always a justification. Always a reason why betrayal was the only option." Cole had moved away from the door, putting the room's small table between them. "You want to hear the truth? Fine. I didn't have a choice. They had my daughter." Words had hit her like a physical blow. All her research, all her investigation, She'd never learned that Cole had a family. What? My ex-wife remarried, moved to California with our girl. I hadn't seen Sarah in 2 years when I got the pictures. Cole's voice had taken on a hollow quality, like he was reciting facts from someone else's life. Photos of her walking to school, getting on the bus, playing in her backyard, and a message: cooperate, or she disappears forever. Danielle had felt her certainty waver for the first time in 7 years. Who, I never knew for sure. The go-between was just a voice on a secure phone, but the operation was too sophisticated. To be local talent, someone with serious resources, serious reach. So you sold out your own unit to protect your daughter. I sold out intel on convoy routes and patrol schedules. I thought I could control it, limit the damage. I never meant for anyone to get killed, but they did. Yes, they did. Admission had hung between them like smoke from a funeral pyre. Danielle had found herself looking at a man she'd hated for 7 years and seeing something she hadn't expected: genuine remorse. Marcus died, calling your name, she'd said quietly. He thought you were coming to help. Cole's face had crumpled. I know. Do you really? Because while you were protecting your daughter, his daughter grew up without a father. You were making deals to save your family. You destroyed mine. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. They'd stood in silence for a long moment, 2 people carrying the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. Finally, Cole had spoken again. What do you want from me, Danielle? Want you to come forward, testify about what happened? Truth about who was really behind the corruption. I can't do that. Why not? Because it would get us both killed. The people I worked for, they're still out there, still connected, still dangerous. You mean the Iron Serpents? Cole's eyes had widened. How did you figure it out? 7 years of investigation. Cole, following money trails and weapon shipments and dead soldiers who asked too many questions. The Serpents are just the local distribution network, aren't they? Someone's been using biker gangs to move military. Hardware from overseas to domestic buyers. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? A Marine colonel with access to classified information sells intel to insurgents. The insurgents capture American weapons and equipment. Those weapons get shipped to the States through criminal networks. The bikers provide muscle and transportation. And everyone gets rich, except the soldiers who die in the process. Cole had been shaking his head, but she could see the confirmation in his eyes. Even if that were true, what difference would it make? You think testifying would change anything? The people behind this have been operating for years. They have protection at every level. Maybe, but at least the families would know the truth. At least Marcus's death would mean something. His death already means something. It means you survived. It means you've got to come home and build a life. What life? The words had come out sharper than she'd intended. What kind of life do you think I've had, Cole? 7 years of hunting? 7 years of rage? 7 years of waking up in the middle of the night seeing his face. She'd pulled out her phone and shown him the photo she carried Marcus in his dress blues, taken just before their deployment. Young and proud and certain that he was fighting for something that mattered. He was going to propose when we got back, had the ring picked out and everything. He showed me the pictures on his laptop, asked if I thought it was too traditional. Cole had looked away, unable to meet her eyes. I never got to answer him, never got to say yes or plan a wedding or argue about where to live, because his commanding officer decided that money was more important than honor. Hey, Danielle, shut up. Just shut up and listen for once in your miserable life. The force of her anger had driven Cole back against the wall. For the first time since she'd entered the room, she'd seen real fear in his eyes. You want to know what the last 7 years have been like? I'll tell you. Every lead I followed, every person I tracked down, every sleepless night spent reading reports and following money trails, all of it was aimed at this moment. At finding you, she'd moved closer. Close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. I had it all planned out, you know? What I'd say, what I'd do, how I'd make you suffer before I killed you. Cole's hand had moved toward his gun again, but she'd grabbed his wrist with surprising speed and strength. But then I found out about your daughter, about the choice you had to make. And you know what? It doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter that they threatened her. It doesn't matter that you were trying to protect your family, because when you made that deal, You chose her life over the lives of my soldiers. You chose one innocent person over 20 innocent people. She'd released his wrist and stepped back. And maybe that makes you human. Maybe it even makes you sympathetic. But it doesn't make you innocent. Cole had been silent for a long moment, rubbing his wrist where her grip had left marks. So what now? You kill me? No. Now you're going to help me find the people who put you in that position. You're going to help me destroy the network that got Marcus killed. I told you, I can't. You can, and you will. Because the alternative isn't death, Cole. The alternative is exposure. I publish everything I've learned about you, about the serpents, about the whole operation. Your daughter finds out what kind of man her father really is. The threat had hit home. Cole had gone pale, his military bearing finally cracking under the weight of 7 years' worth of consequences. You wouldn't. Try me. And in that moment, looking into Danielle's eyes, Cole Bradford had finally understood that the woman he'd once commanded was no longer the same person. The war had changed her, his betrayal had shaped her, and 7 years of hunting had hardened her into something implacable. What do you want me to do? First, you're going to tell me everything, names, dates, operations, all of it, and we're going to take down everyone involved, starting with Rex Thompson and working our way up the chain. Rex is small time. Just provides transportation and muscle. Then we'll start with him and follow the trail to whoever's really in charge. Cole had looked around the shabby motel room one last time, taking in the remnants of his life on the run. If I do this, if I help you, they'll kill us both, probably. But at least we'll die for something that matters. And if I refuse, had smiled and there'd been no warmth in it whatsoever, then you'll die for nothing at all. Now, sitting in her own motel room as dawn approached, Danielle reflected on the choice Cole had made. He'd agreed to help her, but she wasn't naive, enough to trust him completely. Desperate men made desperate choices. Cole Bradford had proven 7 years ago that self-preservation was his primary motivation. But for now, their interests aligned. Cole wanted to survive, and survival meant eliminating the threats against him. Danielle wanted justice, and justice required destroying the network that had killed Marcus. Together, they might actually have a chance. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but she recognized the tone. Rex knows you're here. Meeting tomorrow night at the Devil's Den. Come alone or Eli pays the price. Danielle stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Rex was making his move, trying to regain control of the situation. But he'd made a critical mistake. He thought she cared more about Eli's safety than her. Mission, he was wrong. She cared about both, which made her twice as dangerous as he'd calculated. Following Rex's ultimatum, Danielle arrived at the Devil's Den the next evening to find the parking lot transformed, motorcycles lined up in perfect rows, their chrome catching the dying light. More iron serpents than she'd ever seen stood around in clusters, voices low but anticipation palpable. This wasn't just a meeting, it was an event. The bar had been cleared of civilians, so only bikers remained, creating a wall of leather and metal. Rex sat at his corner booth, wearing his colors like armor. Every patch a declaration of authority. Danielle walked through the crowd with steady steps, ignoring hostile stares and crude comments. These men wanted to see fear. She gave them nothing. Punctual, Rex observed as she approached. I respect that. Where's Eli? Rex gestured toward the back, where the young bartender sat tied to a chair, face bruised but eyes defiant. Flanked him, hands on weapons. He's fine. But for now, depends on how cooperative you decide to be. Danielle studied the setup, cataloging exits and threats. What do you want? Answers. Starting with who you really are. Rex stood, his massive frame unfolding like a mountain deciding to walk. Conversations died as every eye focused on their leader. I learned that Danielle Williams is more than some grieving girlfriend. She's a decorated Marine with 3 tours in Afghanistan, been asking questions about military corruption for 7 years. The words hung in the smoky air. Danielle kept her expression neutral, but her mind raced. Rex had done his homework. Most interesting, she's been tracking former Marine Colonel Cole Bradford, someone who used to be very useful to certain business interests overseas. Business interests. Don't play dumb, Danielle, Rex began, circling her like a shark. Cole was a valuable asset until he got cold feet and disappeared. Someone's been looking for him. Someone willing to pay handsomely for information. The pieces clicked. Rex wasn't protecting Cole. He was planning to sell him. Here's my problem. I can't decide if you're working for the people who want Cole dead or if you're just another loose end. Why don't you ask Cole? Rex smiled coldly. I did. Had a very interesting conversation this morning. He told me fascinating stories about Afghanistan. It's about a certain Marine hunting him for revenge. Danielle's stomach dropped. Cole had talked. Whatever agreement they'd reached meant nothing when Rex applied pressure. The thing is, Cole's story doesn't add up. He claims you want him dead for betraying your unit. But the people paying me to watch for him, they want him alive, Rex gestured. To his men, and the crowd began moving. Chairs scraped as they pushed back against walls, creating an open space. Someone dragged a chain across the floor, marking boundaries of an impromptu arena. The Iron Serpents have a tradition. When outsiders want to join our family, they prove themselves. 3 tests. Survive all 3. Earn respect. Fail, and ... he shrugged. Failure has consequences. Danielle looked around the makeshift arena, and if I refuse, Eli dies slowly while you watch. Then you die quickly, and I collect the bounty on Cole without complications. And if I win, we discuss terms like civilized people. It was obviously a trap, but it bought her time. 3 tests. What are the rules? Simple. No weapons. No help. No mercy. Rex nodded to the crowd, and a young biker stepped forward. Early 20s, lean and quick, with overconfident swagger. His knuckles were scarred, nose broken twice, and he moved like he enjoyed hurting people. This is Tommy. He's eager to make his bones. Tommy cracked his knuckles and grinned. Hope you're ready, sweetheart. I ain't gonna go easy. Danielle stepped into the arena, rolling her shoulders. 7 years of tracking had kept her in shape, but this kid was younger, stronger, probably faster. She'd have to be smarter. Whenever. You're ready, Rex called. Tommy came immediately, throwing wild haymakers like he was trying to take her head off. All aggression, no technique. She ducked under his swing and pivoted, letting momentum carry him past. Stand still and fight. Tommy snarled, spinning for another attack. This time more cautious. Leading with a jab, Danielle slipped easily. She responded with a short uppercut to his solar plexus. Not hard enough to end it, but enough to make him respect her reach. Tommy backed off, reassessing. Around them, serpents shouted encouragement and insults. Some were betting money changing hands. You got some moves? But moves ain't enough. He feinted left, came right with a hook that caught Danielle's shoulder. The impact spun her around, and Tommy followed with a knee aimed at her ribs. But Danielle expected the combination. Straight from basic combat training, she caught his knee on her forearm and used his leverage to twist him off balance. As he stumbled, she drove her elbow into his temple with surgical precision. Tommy's eyes rolled back, and he dropped like a stone. The bar fell silent. Tommy wasn't moving. Well, that was efficient. Rex gestured to another crew member. This one was older, thicker, with methodical movements of a man who'd survived too many fights. His name was Crusher, and he lived up to it, hands like dinner plates, arms that could bend steel. Crusher's been with us 15 years, never lost a fight inside this bar. Crusher stepped into the arena without ceremony. Unlike Tommy, he didn't. Posture. He just studied Danielle with professional patience. Nothing personal, I know. This fight was different. Crusher didn't waste energy on wild swings. He advanced steadily, cutting off angles, forcing Danielle into smaller spaces. When he threw punches, they were economical and devastating. Danielle tried using her speed advantage, but Crusher was too experienced to chase shadows. He controlled the center, waiting for his chance. It came when Danielle's foot slipped on spilled beer. It's just a tiny stumble, but Crusher pounced. His massive fist caught her ribs. Lifting her off her feet and sending her crashing into the crowd, the serpents pushed her back, jeering. Crusher was already moving, follow-up punch aimed at her head. Danielle barely got her arms up to block, but the impact rattled her teeth. "Stay down. This don't have to be ugly." But Danielle was rolling away from his reaching hands. She came, up near the arena's edge, where someone had abandoned a beer bottle. Without thinking, she grabbed it and swung at Crusher's head. "No weapons," Rex shouted. Too late. The bottle shattered against Crusher's skull, opening a gash above his left eye. Blood poured down his face, but instead of dropping him, it made him angry. "Now you've done it." Crusher charged like a bull, vision impaired but rage providing fuel. Danielle sidestepped at the last second, and he crashed into the wall hard enough to shake the building. Before he could recover, she was on him. Wrapping her arm around his throat in a chokehold from Marine training, Crusher thrashed like a trapped bear, trying to slam her against the wall. But Danielle held on, applying steady pressure to his carotid artery. After what felt like eternity, his struggles weakened, then stopped. She released him and stepped back, watching as he collapsed unconscious. The crowd was on its feet, bloodlust fully aroused. 2 fights, 2 victories. But Danielle could see calculation in Rex's eyes. He was impressed, not surprised. He'd expected her to make it this far. 1 more. Then we'll see what you're really made of. The third fighter was legend among the serpents. They called him Vulture. Tall and lean, with a hatchet face and eyes that never blinked, he moved with fluid predator grace. Scars covered his arms and chest, souvenirs from a lifetime of violence. "This is interesting. It's been a long time since someone made it to me." Unlike the others, Vulture took his time entering the arena. He stretched deliberately, working out kinks in muscles that had seen decades of abuse. When he finally faced Danielle, his smile was razor-thin. "I looked into you, Marine. 3 tours, 2 Purple Hearts, Medal of Valor. Impressive record. Thanks for the research. Your fiancé Rodriguez, wasn't it? Died in your arms after an IED. Must have been traumatic." Danielle felt ice form in her chest. Using Marcus's name was crossing a line. Careful, or what? You'll get angry? Good. Angry fighters make mistakes. Vulture began circling her, movements hypnotic and predatory. "Tell me, did he suffer? Did he'd call your name while he bled out?" The rage that had sustained Danielle for 7 years flared white-hot. She lunged at Vulture with everything, abandoning technique for fury. Exactly what he'd been waiting for. His knee caught her stomach, doubling her over. His elbow crashed down on her back, driving her to the floor. Before she could recover, his boot slammed into her ribs. Predictable. Grief makes people stupid. As he reached down to finish her, Danielle grabbed his ankle and twisted with every ounce of strength she had left. Vulture's leg snapped with a sound like breaking wood, and he screamed as he toppled. Danielle hauled herself upright, blood running from her nose and mouth. Vulture was trying to crawl away, broken leg trailing, but she caught him. The beating that followed wasn't pretty. Years of frustration, sleepless nights, and unanswered questions poured out in a torrent of violence. When she finally stopped, Vulture wasn't moving. The bar was silent as death. Rex began clapping slowly, face shadowed. Impressive. Brutal, but impressive. Danielle wiped blood from her split lip and faced him. "Now we talk." Rex poured 2 glasses of whiskey at his private table, sliding one across to Danielle with casual gesture of a man conducting normal business. The rest of the serpents had cleared out after the fights, leaving only Rex's inner circle and Eli, still tied, but alive. "You earned this," Rex said, raising his glass. "To survivors." Danielle didn't touch her drink. "Where's Cole?" "Safe. For now." Rex settled back, studying her like a specimen. "You know, I've been thinking about our mutual friend, about the stories he's been telling." "What stories?" "That's the interesting part. Cole's been spinning 2 different versions. Depending on who's asking, to you, he's the reluctant traitor protecting his daughter. To me, he's the innocent victim framed by corrupt superiors." Rex took a sip, savoring both alcohol and the moment. "But here's what I think really happened. Cole Bradford was a greedy bastard who saw opportunity to make money selling information. He got in over his head, panicked when people started dying. He's been lying to everyone since, trying to save his skin. Danielle's hand moved instinctively toward where her weapon would be, but she was unarmed. Rex noticed and smiled. Easy there, Marine. We're just talking. If you know he's lying, why protect him? Because truth is relative in this business. What matters isn't what really happened. It's what people believe happened.
Right now, certain.
Parties believe Cole has information they need. What kind of information? Rex leaned forward, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Account numbers, or Swiss banks, Cayman Islands, places where very large sums of money have been hidden. Money belonging to people who don't file tax returns. The pieces fell into place. Cole hadn't just been selling intelligence, he'd been skimming profits, building himself a nest egg. How much money? Enough to kill for? Enough to die for. Enough to spend 7 years hunting someone across 3 continents. Rex drained his glass and refilled it. The people looking for Cole, they're not interested in justice or revenge. They want their money back, and they're willing to pay handsomely for information. So you're planning to sell him? I'm planning to auction him. Several interested parties and competition drives up prices. Danielle felt sick. All these years, all this hunting, and it was just about money. Not justice, not honor, just greed.
Hey, what?
About the weapons trafficking, the corruption in Afghanistan, side businesses. Profitable but small scale compared to the main operation. Rex gestured around the bar. You think this place pays for itself? You think motorcycle clubs generate enough legitimate income to support our lifestyle? He was right. The Serpents were living well beyond simple bikers' means. New bikes, military grade, weapons, regional influence. We're distributors. Middle management in a very large, very profitable enterprise. Someone needs weapons moved from point A to point B. We handle transportation. Someone needs people eliminated or intimidated. We provide services. And Cole was your contact inside the military. One of them. We have people everywhere, bases, supply depots, recruitment centers. The military-industrial complex is beautiful when you know how to work it. Danielle thought about Eli's brother, about all the young soldiers who died because of this network. How many people have you killed? Me personally, or the organization as a whole? Does it matter, Rex? Shrugged. Not really. Death is just another business expense, like taxes or insurance premiums. The casual way he discussed murder made Danielle's skin crawl. This wasn't a man, it was a monster wearing human skin. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow night we're having an auction. Several very dangerous people are flying in to bid on Cole Bradford. The winner gets Cole, the account information, and satisfaction of settling old debts, and me.
You're
going to help me deliver him? Danielle stared at Rex in disbelief. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, young Eli gets fed into a wood chipper feet first. Because if you don't, I release video footage of tonight's fights to law enforcement. Because if you don't, I make phone calls that ensure you spend the rest of your very short life looking over your shoulder. Rex's smile was predatory. Or you help me deliver Cole, take your share of profits, and walk away rich enough to disappear forever. Your choice. Before Danielle could respond, the door crashed open. Cole Bradford stumbled inside, hands zip-tied behind his back, and blood streaming from his nose. 2 serpents flanked him, weapons drawn. Boss, we got a problem. Rex's expression darkened. What kind of problem? Bradford tried to run, made it 2 miles before we caught him, but that ain't the worst part. The biker pulled out a cell phone and tossed it onto the table. He made some calls first. 2 people who ain't supposed to know. Where we are. Rex picked up the phone, scrolling through recent calls. His face went white. You stupid son of a bitch. Do you have any idea what you've done? Cole spat blood onto the floor. I know exactly what I've done. I called in the cavalry.
what?
Cavalry? Military intelligence. Internal affairs. The FBI. Everyone who's been looking for evidence of the trafficking network. I gave them everything: names, dates, locations, account numbers. Rex was on his feet, massive hands around Cole's throat. How much did you tell them? Everything. 7 years of keeping my mouth shut, and I finally decided to talk. About Afghanistan, about the weapons deals, about your whole operation. You're lying, am I? Check the timestamps. Then ask yourself how long it takes for federal agents to mobilize when they get a tip about international weapons trafficking. Rex released Cole's throat and grabbed his gun. She'd kill you right now. Go ahead. Won't change anything. Information's already out there. Rex was pacing, composure finally cracking. Around him, lieutenants looked nervous. They had built their empire on staying under the radar, and Cole had just painted a target on all of them. This changes everything. He turned to Daniela's eyes, wild with rage and fear. Did you know about this? No. Are you working with him? I told you I came here to find Cole, that's all. Rex studied her face, looking for deception. Maybe this is all some elaborate federal operation.
Oh, no.
It was a good point, and Rex knew it. But he was beyond rational thought now, driven by paranoia and the knowledge that his world was collapsing. Doesn't matter. Federal or not, you know too much. He raised his gun, pointing it at Danielle's head. Time to tie up loose ends. But before he could pull the trigger, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the bar in red shadows. Through the windows, Danielle could see vehicles surrounding the building, black SUVs with government plates, FBI. This is a federal raid. Exit the building with your hands visible. Rex's gun swung wildly as he tried to track targets in the dim red light. This is impossible. We have people inside law enforcement. Maybe your people aren't as loyal as you thought, Danielle suggested. She was already moving, using confusion to put distance between herself and Rex's weapon. Cole had somehow gotten to his feet, despite restraints, and Eli was struggling against his bonds. Nobody moves, Rex shouted. We can still salvage this. But his men were already running for the back exit, abandoning their leader. Within seconds, Rex found himself alone with his prisoners and the sound of federal agents breaching the front door. Drop your weapon. Rex looked at his gun, then at Danielle, then at the future he'd just lost. His empire was crumbling, his protection was gone, and his choices had narrowed to surrender or suicide. This isn't over, he told Danielle. Yes, it is. Rex raised his gun one final time, but not at Danielle. He pressed the muzzle against his own temple, finger tightening on the trigger. The shot echoed through the devil's den like the end of the world. The aftermath of Rex's suicide left the devil's den looking like a war zone. Federal agents swarmed through the building, their tactical gear and professional efficiency a stark contrast to the bar's seedy atmosphere. Crime scene tapes sectioned off areas where evidence teams photographed bloodstains and collected shell casings. Danielle sat in the back of an ambulance, letting a paramedic clean the cuts on her face, while FBI agents waited their turn to question. Her ribs ached from Crusher's punches. Her knuckles were split from the beating she'd given Vulture. But she was alive. It was more than she'd expected when the night began. Special Agent Sarah Williams, no relation, despite the shared name, approached with a tablet and the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many crime scenes. Mid-40s, graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. She carried herself with the quiet authority of a federal investigator who'd earned her position through competence rather than politics. Ms. Williams, I'm Agent Williams with the FBI. I know you've had a rough night, but I need to ask you some questions. Danielle nodded, wincing as the paramedic applied antiseptic to a particularly deep cut. I understand. Let's start with why you are here tonight. Our information suggests you've been tracking Cole Bradford for several years. 7 years, since Afghanistan. Agent Williams consulted her tablet. You served together in the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force? Your unit was ambushed. Several Marines killed, including your fiancée. You believed Bradford was responsible for selling information to insurgents. I didn't believe it. I knew it. But you never filed official charges. Never went through military channels. Danielle looked across the parking lot where Cole Bradford sat in another ambulance, also being questioned by federal agents. He looked older than his years, worn down by the weight of his choices. Military channels have a way of protecting their own, especially when the corruption goes higher than one colonel. How high? High enough that Bradford's been running free for 7 years, while good Marines stayed buried. Agent Williams made notes on her tablet. Tell me about tonight. What happened? In there, Danielle recounted the events of the fights. Rex's revelations about the trafficking network, Cole's desperate phone calls to federal authorities. She left out nothing, understanding that her cooperation now might be the only thing standing between her and serious criminal charges. The men you fought, 2 of them are in critical condition. The 3rd may never walk again. They gave me a choice: fight or watch an innocent man die. That's not how the law works, Ms. Williams. The law didn't seem to be working very well for the past 7 years. Agent Williams studied Danielle's face, looking for deception or calculation. What she found was exhaustion and a kind of hollow satisfaction, like someone who'd finally reached the end of a very long journey. What do you know about the larger network, the weapons trafficking operation? Only what Rex told me tonight. It's military equipment stolen or diverted overseas, shipped back to the States through criminal organizations. The Iron Serpents were just one distribution point? Did Rex mention names? Other contacts? He said they had people everywhere. Bases, supply depots, recruitment centers, but he didn't give specifics. Agent Williams nodded, making more notes. In the distance, crime scene photographers were documenting Rex's body, their camera flashes creating a strobe effect through the bar's windows. Ms. Williams, I'm going to be frank with you. What happened here tonight, the violence, the vigilante justice, that's not something we can ignore. But the information you've provided, combined with Bradford's testimony, could help us dismantle a trafficking network that's been operating for over a decade. What are you saying? I'm saying cooperation tends to be viewed favorably by federal prosecutors. And right now, we need all the cooperation we can get. Across the parking lot, Eli emerged from the bar, flanked by 2 agents. His face was bruised and his hands shook, but he was walking under his own power. When he saw Danielle, he managed a weak smile and a thumbs up. The bartender, Riley Parker. He's been through enough. Whatever happens, he doesn't deserve to be dragged into this any deeper. It's not your decision to make, no, but it's the right thing to do. His only crime was losing a brother and wanting answers. Agent Williams looked at Eli, then back at Danielle. We'll take his cooperation into account. It wasn't a promise, but it was something. Danielle had learned to take what victories she could find. The paramedic finished treating her wounds and packed up his supplies. You'll want to see a doctor about those ribs. Could be fractures. I'll live. Ms. Williams, Agent Williams said, we're going to need you to come with us. More questions? Formal statements? This investigation is just getting started. Danielle nodded, understanding that her war wasn't over, it was just changing battlefields. The personal vendetta that had consumed 7 years of her life was becoming something larger, more complex. Justice through official channels instead of vigilante violence, as they walked toward the FBI vehicles. Agent Williams spoke quietly. For what it's worth, I read your service record. What you did in Afghanistan, before the ambush that took real courage, the Marines you saved, the missions you completed, that matters. Marcus mattered more. I'm sure he did. But he's gone, and you're still here. The question is what you're going to do with the time you have left. It was a good question, 4-7. Years Danielle's life had been defined by a single purpose: finding Cole Bradford and making him pay for his betrayal. Now that purpose was fulfilled, but not in the way she'd imagined. Instead of personal revenge, she'd uncovered systematic corruption. Instead of killing one man, she'd helped expose a network that had killed dozens. The question was whether that was enough. 6 months later, Danielle sat in a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., watching Cole Bradford take the oath before a congressional committee investigating military corruption. The hearing room was packed with reporters, family members of fallen soldiers, government officials who'd spent years covering up the very crimes now being exposed. Cole looked different than he had in the Devil's Den cleaner. It's healthier but somehow smaller. Prison orange had been replaced by a conservative suit, and his scar seemed less prominent in the fluorescent lighting.
Oh.
But his voice was steady as he began his testimony. My name is Colonel Cole Bradford, United States Marine Corps, retired. For the past 6 months, I've been cooperating with federal investigators in exposing a weapons trafficking network that operated within the U.S. military for over a decade. The committee chairman, a gray-haired senator from Texas, leaned forward. Colonel Bradford, you stand accused of treason, conspiracy, and the deaths of 23 American servicemen and women. Why should this committee believe anything you say? Cole's hands were folded on the table before him, and Danielle could see them tremble slightly. Because I was there, Senator. I participated in these crimes, and I'm willing to face the consequences of my actions if it means stopping others from following the same path. Tell us about Afghanistan. Tell us about the ambush that killed Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez and 6 other Marines. For a moment, Cole's composure cracked. His eyes found Danielle in the gallery, and something passed between them, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. The ambush was my fault. I had been selling information about convoy routes and patrol schedules to insurgent contacts for approximately 6 months prior to the incident. The intelligence I provided directly led to the deaths of those Marines. Murmur rippled through the hearing room. Family members of the fallen soldiers leaned forward, hungry for answers they'd waited years to hear. Why did you do it, Colonel? Cole's voice dropped too, barely above a whisper. My daughter had been kidnapped. The people I was working for had taken her from her mother's home in California. They said they would kill her if I didn't cooperate. Who were these people? Consortium of defense contractors, military officers, and criminal organizations. They called themselves the Meridian Group. Their business model was simple: create demand for weapons overseas, then fulfill that demand using stolen or diverted military equipment. The senator consulted his notes. How did this network operate? Would identify conflicts around the world where weapons were needed, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia. Then they would arrange for military equipment to be lost or destroyed in those areas. The equipment would actually be sold to the highest bidder and the Iron Serpents Motorcycle Club, one of several criminal organizations used for domestic distribution. They would receive shipments at various locations and transport them to buyers throughout the United States. Danielle watched the proceedings with mixed emotions. On one hand, Cole's testimony was exposing the corruption that had killed Marcus and so many others. On the other hand, she couldn't forget that his cooperation was motivated by self-preservation rather than conscience. The questioning continued for hours, with Cole detailing the network's structure, naming names, and providing evidence that would lead to dozens of arrests. Defense contractors who'd facilitated the thefts, military officers who'd falsified reports, criminal organizations who'd provided transportation and muscle. During a recess, Agent Williams approached Danielle. In the hallway, "How are you holding up? It's strange. I spent 7 years wanting to kill him, and now I'm watching him help put away the people who made him into a traitor. Regrets?" Danielle considered the question about hunting him. No. About the violence at the Devil's Den. Sometimes, but if I hadn't found him, if Rex hadn't panicked, and Cole hadn't made those phone calls, none of this would be happening. The families deserve to know the truth. Yes, they do. They walked to the courthouse windows, looking out at the Washington, D.C. skyline. Somewhere in those buildings, decisions were being made that would affect the lives of soldiers around the world. What's next for you? Agent Williams asked. I don't know. For 7 years, I've had one purpose. Now that it's fulfilled, Danielle shrugged. I have to figure out who I am when I'm not hunting someone. Ever think about law enforcement? Bureau could use someone with your skills and experience. Fighting corruption from the inside? Something like that? It was an interesting idea. Danielle had proven she could track down criminals and uncover conspiracies. The question was whether she could do it within the system rather than outside it. When the hearing resumed, the committee called its next witness Seeley Parker. The young man had cleaned up well in the months since the Devil's Den incident. Hair was cut short, his clothes were professional, and he spoke with the quiet dignity of someone who'd found purpose in tragedy. Mr. Parker, you worked as a bartender at the Devil's Den. You also lost a brother in Afghanistan. Tell us about that. Eli's voice was steady but emotional. My brother Tommy was killed 3 days before his rotation ended. An IED unofficially, he'd been investigating corruption in his unit. He was going to report it when he came home. Did he share any specific information with you? He said officers were selling weapons and intelligence. He had proof photographs, documents, but he died before he could present that evidence. What happened to that evidence? It was never recovered from his personal effects. Someone made sure it disappeared. The implications hung heavy in the air. Tommy Parker had been murdered to prevent him from exposing the same network that Cole was now testifying about. Mr. Parker, what do you hope to accomplish with your testimony today? Eli looked directly at the cameras, speaking to families across the country who'd lost loved ones to this conspiracy. I want people to know that my brother didn't die in vain, that he was trying to do the right thing, trying to protect his fellow soldiers, and I want to make sure this never happens again. As Eli continued his testimony, Danielle felt something shift inside her. The rage that had sustained her for 7 years was finally beginning to fade, replaced by something else not peace exactly, but purpose. A sense that Marcus's death, Tommy's death, and all the others might finally mean something. When the hearings concluded that day, dozens of arrest warrants were issued. The Meridian Group's leadership was taken into custody in coordinated raids. Across 3 continents, defense contractors saw their stock prices plummet as federal investigators seized their assets. Military officers found themselves facing courts-martial and prison sentences. Cole Bradford received a plea agreement -20-5 years in federal prison in exchange for his continued cooperation. It wasn't the death sentence Danielle had once wanted for him, but it was justice of a sort. Outside the courthouse, Danielle found Eli waiting on the steps. The young man who'd once been too scared to stand up to local bullies had testified before Congress and helped bring down an international conspiracy. "How do you feel?" she asked. Tired, relieved, scared about what comes next. What does come? Next, Eli smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. College, maybe. Agent Williams thinks the FBI might be interested in someone with my background. Someone who understands how these networks operate from the ground up. That's a good path. What about you? Danielle looked back at the courthouse, where the wheels of justice continued to turn. Inside those walls, bureaucrats and politicians were deciding how to prevent future corruption, how to better protect soldiers, how to honor the memories of those who'd died. I think I might stick around, make sure they follow through on their promises. Fighting the good fight. Something like that. As they walked down the courthouse steps together, Danielle realized that her war wasn't ending, it was evolving. The personal vendetta that had consumed 7 years of her life was becoming something larger, something that could actually make a difference. Marcus was still gone. Tommy Parker was still dead. Nothing could change that. But their deaths had exposed a corruption that might have continued for decades, killing hundreds more soldiers. It wasn't the ending Danielle had imagined when she first walked into the Devil's Den. But as she watched Eli talking animatedly about his plans for the future, as she thought about families finally getting answers about their fallen loved ones, she realized it might be something better than revenge. It might actually be justice. The Marine Corps tattoo on her shoulder had been revealed that night for a reason. Not as a mark of vengeance, but as a symbol of honor reclaimed. The Corps' motto echoed in her mind as she walked through the streets of Washington. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, faithful to the truth, faithful to justice, faithful to the memory of those who died serving their country. The war was over. The real work was just beginning. What would you do if the system failed you so completely that justice could only be found in the shadows? Would you have the courage to hunt your own ghosts? Or would you let them haunt you forever? This story of honor, betrayal, and redemption moved you? Hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful tales that explore the dark corners of the human experience.